My name is Onur Öztürk, and I am an art historian. And today, I brought you a Turkish coffee cup. Sorry, no coffee. It's 5 o'clock. Are you crazy? You're not going to sleep all night. Anyways, this coffee cup is one of the most iconic examples of Turkish Ottoman pottery. With its shape, patterns, and colors, it demonstrates a continuous tradition of 5 centuries. What is considered traditional today, however, is an innovation of color, and it is how Ottoman artists follow their aesthetic impulse for 5 centuries ago. As the tradition proves, they made a huge impact. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I would like to talk about impulse and color in the context of art and color. Impulse comes from the Latin word impulsus, it meaning incitement, an urge to action. Impact comes from impingere, meaning to strike. Historically, artists only created impactful works when they pursued their initial aesthetic urges, impulses about color, form, subject, matter, or whatever, and then committed to their artistic goals through artwork. I love art and visual culture, but especially I love color. Colors make me happy, sad, mad, or just emotional. Just like they made Henri Matisse happy, Pablo Picasso, well, blue, Vincent van Gogh, crazy, and Mark Rothko, emotional. But what is color, and how do we see it? Thanks to science, now we know that colors are waves. Waves reflected from the surfaces of images, objects, and spaces that we can see. Only a tiny portion of waves are actually visible to us. Rainbows, for instance, are now shown to have many more colors extending far beyond what we can see. Yet we can only see the full spectrum of colors of rainbow. And when we can see high-frequency light waves looking violet to low-frequency light waves looking red and everything in between, then the color of an object, of a surface, or whatever it is the frequency of light waves it reflects. So color is less about the material and more about the light. Color is the light. This is something Georges Seurat discovered when he painted A Sunday Afternoon on La Grande Jatte, arguably the most famous and impactful painting we have here in Chicago. It was 1885. The Impressionist exhibition in Paris was just canceled. So Seurat went back to this giant canvas and decided to spend another year, thanks to his privileged status coming from a wealthy family, and added famous dots, which are not even dots. They are actually concentrated patches of color covering the entire surface of the canvas. Studying at Beaux-Arts, Seurat, being a terrible student but having a very curious mind, pursued artistic impulse and discovered emerging scientific literature about color in the library. He recognized that by mixing colors, he can create dull gray tones. But when you put them next to each other, then they appear brighter, more luminous. They started to vibrate. So he was so committed to this idea that 3 years after the exhibition, he decided to take this painting from its original frame, reframed it in a slightly bigger frame so that he can add more complementary dots all around the painting. A young Vincent van Gogh saw Seurat's work, and his world changed forever. Following his impulses, Vincent van Gogh started playing with these interesting ideas. He actually took some yarns. Here are some yarns for you. He started to figure out how those are coming together and, imagine a little bit more crazy version of me and figuring this out. And finally, he started to create examples like this, abandoning his earlier monochromatic and boring style. Now his heart is full of color. You can see how Seurat, he's following Seurat, but he's not copying Seurat. He's figuring out what is working with Seurat, but he's also creating this facial details through these dynamic touches and brushstrokes and creating the style of Vincent van Gogh that we all recognize today. Here is a fascinating detail about these 19th century French paintings. What we see today is just a faded memory of what 19th century weavers looked at. At the height of the Industrial Revolution, new pigments were being discovered consistently. Some of these materials, however, were not time-tested. So the yellow used by Van Gogh and Seurat, for instance, was made of an unstable kind of zinc. And in time, it got dull and brown. Vincent van Gogh, who loved yellow, and even ate it, don't do it, noticed this impulsively, and as a result, he overcompensated with this yellow through these thick applications of color. And that way, you can see that kind of impasto in Poets' Garden, which is also in Chicago. It is interesting that these paintings have been fading since their creation. On the other side, examples of Ottoman art that are almost 500 years old have been so bright and so colorful and historically impactful. The Ottoman interest in Chinese porcelain is well documented. Scholars noted that more than 10,000 pieces of Chinese porcelain were in the imperial collection. The famous Emperor Suleiman actually collected Ming Dynasty pottery, and we know that his artists trying to impress Suleiman mimic this Ming pottery dynasty porcelain. They developed a new kind of pottery that is pretty close to the contemporary Chinese pottery in terms of whiteness and thinness. Since the Ottoman artists did not have access to the Chinese kaolin, a layered silicate material essential for the clay of the Chinese porcelain, they created their own clay mixture, which is high in quartz, but also included something we called frit. Frit, obtained from crushed glass, is a binder. When once the mixture was fired in the kiln, everything came together. Then they apply the pigments and a transparent glaze at a lower temperature to finalize the piece. Initially, Iznik pottery presented various motifs of Ottoman art in many shades of cobalt and blue. Then in 1520s, we start to see a revolution of color, which is not happening, hopefully, there you go. And then in the 30s and 40s, green ranging from sage to olive, and the manganese oxide base purple, and finally, around 1550s, bright red tomato, obtained from iron oxides and applied in a slight relief for a pop effect appear. This new style was so impactful in Ottoman art. Tiles decorated with this new colorful style transformed the interiors. And here I'm showing you one of the famous examples of that, the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, also known as Sultan Ahmet Mosque. Iznik potters created various colorful tableware objects in this style. This was such an influential idea that eventually the potters of China even changed their works into multicolor compositions. But one should wonder, what inspired Ottoman artists to create such impactful works? What ignited their impulse? We have been learning more about some very interesting climate elements of this time period, thanks to the recent work of climate scientists and historians. According to a recent study by Mehmet Kuru, this region experienced one of its most humid periods between 1518 and 1587. Exploring the relationship between climate, agriculture, and the population dynamics of the empire, Kurl argued that a temporary shift in the climatic conditions enabled the expansion of arable lands, growth of population, and increase of taxable agricultural production during the 16th century. So I wonder if this particularly fertile and abundant nature of time, as well as the overall increasing wealth of the empire, may have triggered the artistic impulse of the Ottoman artists. And they created this beautiful, abstract, but vibrant composition. Another question that intrigues me is how these colors really pop. They vibrate in a way that will make Seurat jealous. And here is my theory. Remember when I mentioned colors are the waves that we see? Let's go back to that. Seeing ultimately happens through our eyes, in our brains. And now we know that there are different cone systems in our eyes that perceive three types of color: blue, green, and red. According to trichromatic theory, studies of vision perception, every combination of color perceived by the brain is a combination of blue, green, and red. Through such combinations, we can see up to 1 million different colors. Today, this concept is the foundation of the RGB color model, which has been used to create limitless tons of color on our screens, just combinations of blue, green, and red with varying intensities. There was always a fascination with eyes in Muslim cultures and civilizations. Ibn Rushd was the first to attribute photoreceptor properties to the retina. In fact, the Latin word retina is derived from Ibn Sina, Avicenna's Arabic term that translates as net-like layer. I don't know if the Ottoman artists were familiar with such earlier scientific explorations, and our knowledge of the trichromatic theory was not developed until 19th century. But these creatives must have arrived there with an aesthetic impulse. They found the primary colors of light: blue, green, and red, colors of light. And maybe that's why Ottoman pottery tiles pop. So don't underestimate your creative and scholarly impulses, my friends. Every impulse is an excuse to research, to discover, to make a real impact. Follow them with determination and hard work, and your journey starts now. Thank you.